What's good, YouTube? This is your boy Ray Lewis. I'm back in the business with another video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Get straight to it. The news broke that 1090 Jake was named in the YNW Melly case. A lot of people were confused. While Jake himself would present this to the internet as some kind of badge of honor, he was proud of it, as you can see from this thumbnail picture right here. Pretty much everybody else was looking at this and going, what is the reason? So on today's episode of 1090 Jake Exposed, I will be breaking down how 1090 Jake came to be mentioned in the YNW Melly case and how this situation turned from a proud moment where 1090 Jake was celebrating being mentioned. Did he ever get out? Or is he still fighting that case? To 1090 Jake wanting absolutely nothing to do with this case, claiming that he doesn't know Melly, and even going so far as to expose the officer who actually brought his name into the situation and got on the stand and mentioned him. Now, of course, the whole reason that this 1090 Jake Exposed series exists is because of this.
How easy is it to get drugs in a Florida prison?
Every single compound I hit, there was all types of drugs on there, whether it's prescription pills, Molly, some spots there was cocaine and meth, but nothing more common than K2.
Jacob Cherry, a former inmate, posted the videos to YouTube.
1, 2, 3, 4 flips.
He says Florida inmates currently behind bars recorded the videos using cell phones smuggled inside.
Key word there, currently behind bars, meaning that this is not just something he was talking about that was going on while he was incarcerated, but something that's currently going on right now, meaning that the state needs to take action right now if they want to stop this. Jake would be filmed making these statements to ABC investigative reporter Brian Enton, who would in turn be filmed presenting Jake's video and statements to State Representative Bobby Dubose. This would trigger his duty as a state representative to report the information to the Department of Corrections, who will release a statement saying that they take the matter seriously and that they were aware of the videos.
The Florida Department of Corrections tells 7 News they are aware of the videos, and the agency takes this information seriously. They call contraband in prisons a national epidemic.
This statement and public acknowledgement from the department meant that they would now be required to report Jake, his videos, and his statements to the Inspector General. Jake would try to downplay this by saying that he was just speaking on general topics that everybody knows and everybody knows goes on in prison, claiming that no officers were arrested as a result of anything that he said on the news.
They would claim the officers must have raided the prisons I was at, but I'd already been out of prison for 5 years. And what officers got arrested? See, the Florida Department of Corrections has a website newsroom that covers press releases, staff assaults, and officer-involved arrests. But not one article can be produced showing any officer was ever arrested. But that has been debunked. 2019 and January 2020, 4 inmates would die at Charlotte Correctional Institution alone in suspected overdoses, and the heat from Jake was forcing them to produce answers. In the months following Jake's news segment, a shakedown at Charlotte Correctional Institution would turn up results.
A 5-month-long investigation lands one woman in handcuffs after conspiring with inmates to bring contraband into CCI. Jessica Haller was arrested on September 8th on 11 charges to include 10 felonies.
4 months ago, the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office Narcotics Unit learned that an individual was delivering and conspiring to deliver illegal drugs, cell phones, cigarettes, lighters to the CCI prison located in Charlotte County.
Among the charges are introduction of a cell phone and controlled substances into a state correctional facility and trafficking.
We were able to develop probable cause after several search warrants and latent fingerprint evidence left on the illegal packages that it was in fact Jessica delivering these contraband items to the prison.
It's important that we keep contraband from getting into our facilities to keep our inmate population safe, and that's just as true at the state level as it is at the county level. I want to thank the Northport Police Department and also Warden Snyder for all their help in this investigation and bringing it to a successful conclusion.
The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office would announce the charges in September of 2020 after a 5-month investigation that began when a contraband phone was found containing evidence of an inappropriate relationship between a guard and an inmate by the name of David Odell. The officer had been charged with bringing contraband into the facility, and David had been charged with introducing contraband as well as possessing a controlled substance. Through collaborative efforts between several units within the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, Northport Police Department, the FBI Prison Division, and Warden Snyder, a significant amount of contraband was intercepted prior to entering the facility. During the investigation, detectives were able to connect Jessica Holler to inmate David R. Odell when he was found to be in possession of a smartphone. So that can consider a snitch. I don't know. I'm just asking. You know what I'm saying? Conversations via the prison communication system revealed messages and photos of items that would later be found among the hidden contraband. Holler is accused of purchasing items such as cell phones, lighters, drugs, cigarettes, and jewelry, along with electrical tape as part of the conspiracy. Electrical tape is often used to make internal concealment easier. This process is often referred to as body packing. Information uncovered during this investigation would spark another investigation. Evidence recovered during this operation would lead to the unveiling of a drug conspiracy between the Latin Kings, the MS-13, and the Serranios. According to an October 12, 2022 news report.
Trafficking operation is shut down in the Bay Area and in much of Southwest Florida. Our state attorney general says they took a massive violent gang operation out of business. Joining us now live from the Tampa News Center, 8 on Your Side's Melissa Marino.
Good afternoon, Stacey. The AG says this was enough fentanyl to kill half the state of Florida. And just as surprising, we are told this was being orchestrated from the Florida State Prison.
People don't understand, what does that mean, 50 pounds of fentanyl? That could kill half of Florida's population.
FDLE agents say the ringleader is a Florida prison inmate, Carlos Martinez, a member of the Sur 13 gang, behind bars for attempted murder. According to investigators, from inside the prison, Martinez and others instructed gang members to move large shipments of narcotics across the United States and distribute it all over Florida.
Their members operate from both inside prison walls and outside of them, living in our communities and our neighborhoods.
A 2-year investigation leading to dozens of arrests. Agents also seized large shipments of drugs and weapons, including nearly 400 pounds of methamphetamine, 48 pounds of fentanyl, 15,000 fentanyl pills, heroin, morphine, dozens of guns, and over 100 grand in cash.
By the sheer volume in this case, this is not just an average seizure. Nearly 50 pounds is a significant interruption in the flow of narcotics.
Now, the Attorney General says they are charging these suspects with the most serious crimes possible, including more than 60 first-degree felonies. And this investigation not over. They expect more people will be charged. Back to you.
Now, it should be noted that although this case was announced in 2020, we're very clear about the fact that it was a 2-year investigation dating back to 2020.
A 2-year investigation leading to dozens of arrests.
The Year of Jake's news segment and the shakedowns at Charlotte CI. To demonstrate that the focus in that case was not just the Serranios, at a press conference after a guilty plea, Attorney General Ashley Moody said, "A Latin King gang member involved in a massive drug ring working with the Mexican drug cartel is now sentenced to 25 years in prison, thanks to our statewide prosecutors and dedicated law enforcement partners. In this case, authorities seized enough fentanyl to kill more than 11 million Floridians." That's petty work. Lethal substances are flooding into our countries due to Biden's disastrous open border, and we must continue to be dogged in our efforts to interdict this poison and aggressively prosecute traffickers. According to the investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Homeland Security Investigations, and Hendry County Sheriff's Office. Members of the Serenio 13 gang, also known as Serenios, operated the drug trafficking organization from behind bars. At times, working with fellow gangs MS-13 and the Latin Kings, the criminal organization's ruling body, called the MESA, authorized member requests to execute other inmates and continue the distribution of drugs sourced from Mexico and California. Using contraband cell phones, members of SOR 13 contacted each other from different prisons throughout the state, including Brevard, Charlotte, Holmes, and Miami-Dade counties. Gang members also kept contact with area drug dealers outside the prisons to facilitate drug shipments and
They know the whole 9 yards, the ins and outs. Crazy work.
deliveries. It should also be noted that Jake did a video solely on the Serenios and how they operate in Florida prison in May of 2020 as well, around the same time as the investigation started. Jake would make clear in that video that he was looking to have an active or ex-Serenio on his platform to discuss the California connection. Now, I know some of y'all thinking, what does any of this have to do with YNW Melly and Detective Danny Polo, right? So I want you to look at the screen and take a nice mental note of the offices that it said participated in this investigation, specifically the FBI Prison Division. And what I will do now is direct your attention to these transcripts from YNW Melly's hearing where Detective Danny Polo testified. Let's see what he had to say. The court, raise your right hand to be sworn. The clerk, do you swear or affirm the testimony you should give in this case should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? The witness, yes, sir. The clerk, state your full legal name for the record. The witness, Detective Danny Polo. The clerk, spell your first and last name for the court reporter. The witness, DANNYPOLO. The clerk, thank you, sir. The court, thank you. Please have a seat. The witness, thank you, Your Honor. The court, counsel, if you're ready, you may proceed. Ms. Bucklew, thank you, Your Honor. Direct examination by Ms. Bucklew. Good morning, Detective. Good morning. Please tell us who you work for. Broward County Sheriff's Office. And how long have you worked for them? Since 2015. And in what capacity do you work for them? I'm currently assigned to the Strategic Investigations Division, Money Laundering Task Force. All right. And what other units have you worked for? Prior to that, I was assigned to the Gang Investigations Task Force. And prior to that, I was assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force. Before that, I was in the Deerfield Beach Crime Suppression Team. And before that, I was in the Deerfield Beach Tactical Deployment Team. Okay. And all of this is as a detective, correct? Yes. Okay. Prior to being a detective, were you a deputy for Broward Sheriff's Office? Yes. How long were you as a deputy? Were you on the road? Approximately 11 months. All right. What type of training and experience do you have with regards to organized crime, gang activity, investigating those type of cases? Formal training through police conferences and classes at the Broward Institute of Public Safety, as well as self-study, self-research. It's over 500 hours of formal instruction, and it would be hard to put a number on self-study, self-research, reading articles, journals, stuff like that. All right. And did you work at any other law enforcement prior to BSO? The City of Hollywood PD. In what capacity? I was on the road. Okay, road deputy. At any point while being on the road, did you ever have to investigate in some capacity some sort of gang activity or organized crime? Yeah, I mean, your first year, you're basically just on probation learning. So you're asked to respond to multiple scenes and take the lead on cases that aren't necessarily murders. So I had a lot of encounters with gang-related cases, robberies, homicides, burglaries. Mr. Aronson, Your Honor, may we ask that the witness just speak up a little bit? The witness, I'm sorry, sir. Ms. Bucklew, So when you went to BSO as a road patrol officer, did you also have some sort of capacity in investigating those types of crimes? Yeah, I was familiar with it. I had taken courses. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the Tactical Deployment Team. Tactical Deployment Team was a unit established approximately end of 2015, maybe 2016, and it was primarily formed as a proactive unit to address gang issues in the city of Deerfield Beach, in the central zones of Deerfield where we were having the most gang violence. It was also a community, sort of like a community outreach scene. We did a lot of events with churches, youth outreach, community leaders. That way we can combat violence not just by proactive enforcement of laws, but by partnering with the community and the churches and members of the community and talk to the children and try to keep them from continuing this endless cycle of violence. Okay, and that endless cycle of violence included gang activity. It was mainly gang activity. And talk to us a little bit about your experiences with the crime suppression team. Crime suppression team was sort of the same, proactive enforcement of criminal violations, criminal laws, less community outreach. That was more for the tactical deployment team to go out there and do the community outreach. But we still had events with community when we had to go out there and engage with the community leaders and hear their concerns about the violence and crimes that were happening in their areas. And in the crime suppression team, we would address any crime-related concerns, anything, period, that the city wanted to address, whether it was burglaries, robberies, a spike in violence. It didn't matter. We handled it all. Mainly the narcotics, firearms, and violent crime investigations and burglary investigations were usually tied to criminal gangs. And that's how it was actually during the tactical deployment team I was assigned to the Broward County Multi-Agency Gang Task Force. What's that? It's a task force in Broward County made up of multiple cities, so the sheriff's office hosted. We had monthly intel meetings where the different districts that aren't a part of Broward Sheriff's Office will come and give intel briefings on the gang-related issues in their cities, and it's a lot of intel sharing. That way we can assist each other with the gang problems happening in the county, sometimes in the Tri-County area. Partner with the probation, parole, with juvenile prosecution, because a lot of these gang issues started at the juvenile age. And during those intel meetings that we had monthly, we also received additional training. And then we would host monthly, monthly enforcements where the city was having an issue with gang-related violence or anything gang-related. We would take all of the agencies in the county that wanted to participate, go to a certain area that was having issues, and proactively enforce violations of criminal law. All right. And I want to talk about your time in the organized crime unit. When did you head to the organized crime unit with the Broward Sheriff's Office? I believe it was 2018. All right. And what kind of duties did you have within that unit? Organized crime unit, it was basically primary duties were investigating anything related to organized crime. So gang activity falls within organized crime. So within the organized crime statute under racketeering statute. And most of my investigations dealt with criminal gangs or spinoffs from criminal gang investigations, such as I dealt with drug trafficking organizations,
Shit, that's why the streets is there. You know what I'm saying? Please, man, that. You better watch out.
cartel investigations, firearm trafficking investigations, sources of supply to these gangs, and racketeering investigations for the most part. I think in the 5 years I was in organized crime, the main cases I filed most of the cases I filed while I was in organized crime were all RICO cases. Large scale drug trafficking and cases I filed while I was in organized crime were all RICO cases. large-scale drug trafficking and gang investigations. All right. Now, within the organized crime unit, was there any community outreach or was this solely investigative work? Investigative work. Okay. While you had your time in the organized crime unit, did you handle wiretap ones? Yeah. How many would you say? I personally have written, give me 1 second, approximately 9 or 10. Okay. And with the ones that you did not write, were you still a part of other investigations that would include utilizing search warrants and arrest warrants for organized crime, gang activity, things of that nature? Yeah, I was involved in, I think, a total of 18 wiretap investigations. So I authored 9 of them myself. One of them was on a large criminal gang within Broward County. I was the assisting the prison gang wiretap investigation. Was a little different than a street gang because they're in a prison. So I've seen both sides of that, gang investigations behind the wall or while in prison and investigations outside of prison. On the local street gangs, hybrid gangs, national gangs, small juvenile gangs that are just getting started. All right. Now, your time in this unit, did it also include undercover work? Yeah, I was doing a lot of undercover work through most of my time in the crime suppression team, organized crime unit, gang unit, money laundering. Now, with the wiretaps that you mentioned previously, you would obviously be listening in on phone calls, correct? Correct. Okay. And during your time in listening to those phone calls, these are long-term investigations, correct? Yes. Okay. So while listening to these phone calls, are you listening to gang activity and learning how they speak and what they speak about? Yeah, you're listening to them without them knowing you're listening to them. So they are not trying to hide anything. They might speak a little bit in code, but most codes aren't that sophisticated where you can't understand what they are saying. You just have to figure it out. What's the code mean? So it's first.
Figured out the slang and that's crazy work.
First-hand experience of how these gangs communicate. Apart from that, we've been on cases on investigations where we've actually had undercover officers infiltrate the gangs as members of the gangs, get blessed into these gangs, and personally monitor these live recordings, meetings, obtain relevant gang knowledge, and via emails and other applications, covert applications that gangs like to use to conceal their inner workings. Okay. Now, with your organized crime unit that you were in doing undercover, all the things you just testified to, did you also work with other agencies, such as federal agencies? Yeah, I'm currently time in the crime suppression team.
This could be turned into a movie. This could be turned into a movie right here. Crazy work.
Organized crime unit, gang unit, money laundering. Now, with the wiretaps that you mentioned previously, you would obviously be listening in on phone calls, correct? Correct. Okay. And during your time in listening to those phone calls, these are long-term investigations, correct? Yes. Okay. So while listening to these phone calls, are you listening to gang activity and learning how they speak and what they speak about? Yeah, you're listening to them without them knowing you're listening to them. So they are not trying to hide anything. They might speak a little bit in code, but most codes aren't that sophisticated where you can't understand what they are saying. You just have to figure it out. What's the code mean? So it's first-hand experience of how these gangs communicate. Apart from that, we've been on cases on investigations where we've actually had undercover officers infiltrate the gangs as members of the gangs, get blessed into these gangs, and personally monitor these live recordings, meetings, obtain relevant gang knowledge, and via emails and other applications, covert applications that gangs like to use to conceal their inner relevant gang knowledge, and via emails and other applications, covert applications that gangs like to use to conceal their inner workings. Okay. Now, with your organized crime unit that you were in doing undercover, All the things you just testified to, did you also work with other agencies, such as federal agencies? Yeah, since approximately 2018, I've been a task force officer with the Drug Enforcement Administration and also a task force officer with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive. That's ATF. All right. So being a task force officer with those two agencies, what does that entail? You're deputized as a fellow agent, basically. You can file criminal complaints in federal court, testify in federal court, file federal charges, not just state charges. Most of these long-term investigations are federally funded and lead to federal prosecutions, especially since many of these cases end up leading to international nexuses. Okay, while you're in these units, are you also going to conferences and learning more about the updates and how gangs are working, the specific types of gangs and all of that? Yeah, conferences.
So they money your whole life. You know what I'm saying? This is the allegedly so-called gang. You know the ins and outs.
Regular, just 1 or 2 day trainings. You learn from seasoned detectives that have been doing this for 30 years. You learn from doctors, students that study sociology, psychology, and gangs. You learn from investigators in the field that are privately obtained by defense and state agencies to testify on criminal gang cases. And you learn how these cases are put together. You learn specific information about gangs. You get to many times watch live interviews with gang members that are in custody serving a life sentence with no way of getting out, and they decided to turn their lives around while in prison. So they are getting no benefit. And you get to, have one-on-one with these subjects. Most recently, I was at a national gang conference where I was teaching. There was a youth outreach group there at Fort Pierce that I was able to network with. They are all civilians, no law enforcement. Prior gang members, reformed gang members that have turned their lives around, got PhDs, are in school currently getting their degrees, and their goal is networking with law enforcement in a way that effectively can bridge the gap between what the gangs might.
You see that? You know what I'm saying? This part right here, we really don't hear about. You know what I'm saying? Turning their life around, getting you know what I'm saying? DH, turn their life around again, get HDs. You know what I'm saying? Currently going to school to get their degrees. You know what I'm saying? We really make a better change.
Might consider snitching and what the community wants being done, which is ending violence. Okay. Now, while in the organized crime unit, you mentioned there's different types of gangs. You mentioned prison gangs as a type of gang. Yes. So what type of gangs did you investigate? The actual gangs or just the types of gangs or actual gangs? So national gangs such as Bloods, Crips, GDs, Serranios, big wiretaps case on Serranios and MS-13, wiretap case on the Bloods. There was another case I was involved in with the FBI. I wasn't deputized with them, but I assisted. I think that was another 9 wiretaps that included the original team. That was 9-2 Gangster Bloods, a set, 9-2 Gangster Bloods set out of Broward. Several subjects that are somewhat related to this case. We'll get there. GDs, Bloods, Crips. Safe to say there's a lot? Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of hybrid gangs. The hybrid gangs are non-traditional gangs like the neighborhood street gangs. Those you can't stop. Like they just pop up every day, so they change their names a lot. So we investigated many of those. I'm not going to start throwing off all those names. A lot of those are either active investigations or we're in the middle of going to trial or stuff like that. but many active cases on these hybrid gangs, racketeering investigations on them, the whole mafia family, which is now becoming more of a national gang. It may have started on in South Florida approximately 10 years ago. Many folk nations gangs, vice lords, Black P Stone Nation. Safe to say there's a lot. Yeah. Okay. You've also investigated prison gangs. Yes. And can you explain to us about your time with the Gang Investigations Task Force? So I went to the Gang Investigations Task Force after about 5 years in the Organized Crime Task Force. Okay. Now, before we go further, let's break this down. Detective Danny Polo became a member of the Broward Organized Crime Unit in 2018. During this exact same time frame of 2018 is when he was deputized as a federal task force officer with the DEA and ATF. During this time, he participated in approximately 18 wiretap investigations, including what he himself called a big wiretaps case on the Serranios and MS-13s, and also a big wiretaps case on the Bloods, which I believe is related to the sex money murder case that came out about 3 or 4 years ago down in Florida, because that's around the same time when Jake was so-called pressing the Island Boys for being fake Bloods, allegedly fake members of sex money murder. So that was bringing a lot of heat to sex money murder and putting a lot of attention on them down there.
Island Boys, because they're talking about they were saying they were sex money murder.
Right, yeah.
All right, well, you in the state of Florida, so if you're gonna be that, there's a specific motherfucker you have to know. I wanted to know if he knew that specific person.
Ironically, around the same time that Jake was publicly mentioning sex money murder, the state was closing an investigation that they had started into sex money murder for doing what? Bringing contraband drugs into the Florida prison system. So as it turns out, Detective Danny Polo is not just some random guy who watches 1090 Jake on YouTube. He's actually a member of the multi-agency gang task force that has acted on every tip that 1090 Jake has given them, specifically the tips that he gave them on the news about the prison gangs and the drug contraband that led to all of these different people being arrested. And don't overlook the fact that the same task force that Detective Danny Polo claims he belongs to is the same task force that investigated and charged Pino after he had that little situation with 1090 Jake. Y'all know the one I'm talking about. So I think that 1090 Jake knows exactly why Detective Danny Polo is here. But I also think that 1090 Jake did not receive the type of clout and recognition from being mentioned in the paperwork that he thought he was going to get. He actually got some backlash, and that's why he pulled the whole, oh, I'm going to expose the detective, and try to make it seem like this guy just obsessed with him and bringing him up for no reason. When the truth is, this guy and his team have been acting on your tips and the information that you've been putting out for close to 10 years now. Look at him with the mask on, man. These guys been moving like this for years. Jake tried to make it like he was doing something big, unmasking a guy, when you probably seen him in that mask 10 or 15 times already at a meeting or something. Who knows? On that note, I'm going to wrap this up. Melly, if you listening, if you hear about this, cut whatever ties with whoever you got ties with that got ties to do immediately. Pino, if you had a hunch that he put the police on you, you can almost be certain about that now. In my opinion, it's pretty obvious what happened to Pino. With that said, if you listening to music on Spotify,
that's crazy work, man. So that's the end of this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Your boy Ray was on out.